Hello there. In this video, I'm going to talk about the Lansdowne Streetcar. This is a streetcar that was born out of the necessity to bridge a gap in service and would one day become an important north-south running streetcar line for the western end of the city. So, let's get into the video. The origins of the Lansdowne Streetcar trace back to the early 1900s. Lansdowne Avenue itself dates back to the 19th century and ran from Queen Street to Davenport Road for a time. The street, for the most part, was residential with some commercial activity. The CP rail tracks between DuPont and Davenport, however, were a draw for industrial development and the jobs it brings, so Lansdowne Avenue had some level of importance. In 1910, the Toronto Railway Company would open its Lansdowne car house at the intersection of Lansdowne Avenue and Patton Street. This would be facilitated by the installation of track along Lansdowne Avenue between Dundas Street and Royce Avenue. While the TRC laid tracks up to Royce Avenue, the company chose not to extend the trackage any further, even though by this point Lansdowne Avenue had been extended to St. Clair Avenue. The CP rail tracks just north of DuPont Street would be the primary obstacle in the way. As well, the tracks would mark the boundary for the city of Toronto back in 1891 when the TRC received its charter. The TRC had become quite firm in its stance that it would not serve areas beyond what was described in its 1891 charter. This story would also transpire on Danforth Avenue and St. Clair Avenue. Just as in the previous two examples, the TRC's reluctance to extend its service into newly annexed areas would force the City of Toronto to construct its own line, just as it had done on St. Clair, Danforth, and Gerrard Street East. The Lansdowne Streetcar would be the last line constructed by the Toronto Civic Railway, with construction having been slated to start in 1915. Construction of the line, however, would encounter complications. One of these would be the crossing of Davenport Road and the Davenport Streetcar, which was owned by the Toronto Suburban Railway. The road immediately north of Davenport Road features a steep incline as well as a sharp turn, and it is for this reason that the Ontario Railway Board demanded the installation of safety measures at the intersection of Lansdowne Avenue and Davenport Road. One of these measures would include semaphore signals and derail points, both of these being in place to prevent a possible accident between a TSR streetcar and a runaway TCR streetcar coming down the hill. The purchase and installation of these safety systems would delay construction of the line until 1916. Service on the Lansdowne Streetcar would commence on January 16, 1917, with service operating from a crossover at St. Clair Avenue to a crossover north of the CP rail tracks. Due to the CP rail tracks, the TCR's Lansdowne Streetcar could not connect to the TRC line south of the tracks, so passengers would have to make a walking transfer. The line did, however, offer a free transfer to the TCR's St. Clair Streetcar, the only one of its kind in the TCR network. The Lansdowne Streetcar would come under ownership of the Toronto Transportation Commission on September 1, 1921. While the TTC now owned the tracks on both sides of the CP rail line, service could not be integrated due to said railway tracks. On February 17, 1922, the TTC would open Royce Loop on the south side of the railway tracks. At first, this loop would be the terminus of the College Streetcar, and then the Harvard Streetcar a couple of days later on the 22nd. On April 2nd, the TTC would begin operations of a second Lansdowne Streetcar, operating from Royce Loop to a Y at Dundas Street. The two Lansdowne streetcars would thus be given the names Lansdowne North for the former TRC line operating from St. Clair to the CP rail tracks, while the new line would be called Lansdowne South. These names were only internal, however, and out in the field it seems both lines just used the name Lansdowne. For a time, the Lansdowne North Streetcar would operate with two-man crews due to the special intersection at Davenport Road. Since operators were required to manually set the signals, southbound streetcars were required to stop so as to let the guard set the signal. Upon crossing the road, the guard would then have to reset the signal for Davenport streetcars. Northbound streetcars, however, would not have to do this. This arrangement would last until 1933, when rolling stock used on the line was deemed to have sufficiently strong enough brakes to navigate the hill, and so the safety system installed at the intersection was removed. Two-man operation of the line would be ended and replaced by one-man operation on June 3rd of that year. The Lansdowne South streetcar would see an extension of its service on May 24, 1923. This extension would operate during evenings, Saturday afternoons, and all-day Sundays. This extension would see the line extended west on Dundas Street and Howard Park Avenue to Roncesvalles Avenue. From here, the line would travel south to Lakeshore Boulevard and west to Humber Loop. This service would bear the Sunnyside name and would operate until October 14th. Service would resume on June 1st, 1924 and operate until August 31st. This service would then not be seen again for 17 years. Both the Lansdowne North and South streetcars would operate 24 hours a day, with night service on the Southern line being served by an extension of the Bloor streetcar. Overnight service on the Northern line, however, would be a burden on the TTC due to its short length and low ridership. Night service on both branches would be converted to bus operations on August 25, 1924, and offer a through service on both lines, operating from St. Clair Avenue to Dundas Street. This night bus would operate through the 1930s and be extended to Townsley Loop in 1942. As well, Sunday service would be converted to bus operations on April 17, 1932. This night bus would operate until June 7, 1942, when it would be abolished and replaced by streetcars due to a shortage in gas and rubber due to the war. Into the 1930s, the Lansdowne North streetcar would continue to use double-ended streetcars, even though a new loop was constructed at St. Clair Avenue on May 19, 1931, today's Earls Court Loop. A crossover remained at the south end of the line at this time while the City of Toronto and CP Rail worked on construction of an underpass for Lansdowne Avenue. This underpass would open on June 5, 1931, and with it, tracks were installed, thus linking the two branches of the Lansdowne streetcar together. For a time, however, the two Lansdowne streetcars would remain separate, possibly owing to the difference in ridership on both branches. This split in service, however, would come to an end on April 3, 1933, when the Lansdowne North and Lansdowne South streetcars were unified into a single Lansdowne streetcar, operating from a loop at St. Clair Avenue to a crossover at College Street. During the summer of 1937, and from May to November of 1938, service on the Lansdowne streetcar would be extended south to a Y at Dundas Street. This was to facilitate an easier transfer to the Dundas streetcar after it was rerouted due to the construction of railway bridges west of Lansdowne Avenue. On May 24, 1939, service on the Sunnyside streetcar would resume after 17 years, with it now operating from St. Clair Avenue to Parkside Loop. This service would operate every summer until 1946, when it was abolished for good. The final changes to the Lansdowne streetcar would come in the 1940s. Due to the onset of World War II, many factories in Toronto would become major employment centers for the war effort, and those factories along Lansdowne were no different. On May 9, 1940, College Street would be extended to Dundas Street, and with it, a creation of an on-street loop. This loop would be utilized by the Lansdowne streetcar, now looping via College Street, Dundas Street, and Lansdowne Avenue. With the line now having loops at both ends, double-ended streetcars would be gradually phased out and replaced with single-ended Peter Witt cars by February 12, 1942. The Lansdowne streetcar would receive an extension on February 19, 1942, when rush hour service was extended to the Canadian National Exhibition. This line would see the line routed east along Dundas Street to Bathurst Street. From here, the line would head south to Fleet Street and then west to the Exhibition Loop. The CNE grounds had been used by the military as a staging ground for troops, and so the Lansdowne Streetcar would join the Fort Streetcar in ferrying personnel to and from the CNE grounds. The final extension of service would come on June 7, 1942, when the Dominion War Commission ordered night service on the line be extended west along St. Clair Avenue to Townsley Loop. These overnight runs would be handled by PCC streetcars starting on October 1st. When the war ended, so did the expanded service to the CNE and Townsley Loop on June 22, 1946. The last day of service for the Lansdowne Streetcar would come on June 19, 1947, ending 30 years of service. Service would be replaced by the Lansdowne trolley bus, which operated a longer route from St. Clair to Queen Street. The reason for ending service on Lansdowne Avenue came down to a lack of resources. While the TTC saw a sharp increase in ridership during the war years, the TTC would also see a sharp decline in its infrastructure due to war rationing. When the war was over, the TTC simply didn't have the money to repair all of its lines, which saw more wear and tear than usual due to the increased service demands of the war. The TTC saw trolley buses as a cheaper alternative in this regard, and service could be expanded faster and cheaper without the need to lay down tracks. In regards to Lansdowne as well, trolley buses feature great hill climbing capabilities, which could be perfect for the hill north of Davenport Road. The tracks between St. Clair Avenue and Davenport Road would eventually be torn up, although the tracks south of there would remain to provide access to the Lansdowne car house for other routes. When the Bloor Danforth subway opened, however, Lansdowne car house would be converted into a trolley bus garage, and its former streetcar routes either abolished or relocated to other facilities. With this, the remainder of tracks between DuPont Street and College Street would be torn up as well. Today, nothing remains of the Lansdowne Streetcar, save for a short segment of track at St. Clair Avenue for Earls Court Loop, and a short segment of track between College Street and Dundas Street. The Lansdowne car house / garage itself no longer exists either, as it was torn down in 2003 after being converted to a standard bus garage in the late 90s. The land it stood on, however, is still empty as of the writing of this video. The Lansdowne Streetcar was a victim of the war, or more accurately the post-war maintenance required due to the heavier use and deferred maintenance caused by the war years. From the looks of it, it could have still been a viable route in the post-war world, at least for some time. Perhaps had the TTC had the money to fix up the line, it could have survived longer than it did. Today, however, making a case for a new Lansdowne Streetcar would be hard due to the new tracks that would be needed to be laid and the ridership of the 47 Lansdowne bus. While ridership on the Lansdowne bus is by no means low, it is also by no means at streetcar capacity, as compared to say its eastern neighbor, the Dufferin bus. A resurrected Lansdowne Streetcar to me would pretty much follow its old route, starting at Earls Court Loop and heading south, making a connection to the subway at Lansdowne Station. However, while its northern terminus is obvious, I do wonder what its southern terminus could be. The line could just follow its old route exactly, looping via College and Dundas. However, that to me doesn't feel like a natural terminus. Back in the day it may have been, but I don't think it would work today. In this hypothetical scenario, I would propose a southern extension of the line to Queen Street and then from there east to Dufferin Loop. Not only would this require the construction of even more tracks, however, it would also require the addition of western access onto Dufferin Street, as right now streetcars can only access Dufferin Street from the east. The connection to the subway would be fine with it just being an on-street connection, since the streetcar isn't terminating there and Lansdowne Station doesn't see as much ridership as Dufferin Station does, nor is traffic on Lansdowne Avenue as bad as that on Dufferin Street. In the end, however, like many other lost streetcar lines in the city, the end of the Lansdowne Streetcar was not from being replaced, but by some outside force. It is easy to ask what if. What if the TTC had enough money to fix up the line after the war? How much longer would it have survived? would it still exist today? Perhaps it could have. The Lansdowne Streetcar did have the benefit of being out of the way of its competition, but this also means that its ridership would likely never reach that of its downtown counterparts. But with that, I will end this video here. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it and want to see more like it, please hit that subscribe button because there's more videos like it on the channel and there's more videos like it on the way. If there's anything you want to say about the Lansdowne Streetcar, don't be afraid to do so in the comments section down below. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.